Roommates, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Oh, how things change from having a roommate to having a spouse. Also, the amazing game that was Super Bowl 51.
Yeah.
And we answer your questions that you emailed in. All that and more on this episode of
Dude,
We're Adults.
let's go.
Hey everybody, and thank you for downloading and listening to this episode. We're now 3 episodes in and having a great time, and we hope you are as well. Speaking of a great time, who had a great time on Super Bowl Sunday?
First of all, Mike, how does it feel leading the podcast this week?
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable? Come on, man, you're good. You got it.
It's like washing a pair of jeans and putting them on and they're too tight. I just wasn't used to it.
So it feels tight to you.
It does feel tight. But just going back to Super Bowl 51, we won't spend too much time on this. I know I promised you to. Yeah, I promised you guys we wouldn't spend too much time on this. Also because we talked a lot about football the past 2 episodes. But I do want to say that after my 4th shot of Fireball and watching James White cross the end zone, I was actually not even sure he scored at the moment. I don't know if you saw the clip of Julian Edelman super confused and saying, "Get off the field! We haven't seen if they approved the play yet or reviewed the play yet." I was like walking around like, oh, did we win? Did we win? And everyone was kind of doing the same thing at the party I was at. And then once we realized we won, it was like pure jubilation. It was different than when we won 2 years ago when Butler made the interception, because that was definite like, yes, we won. And this one was like, what happened? But I was stoked. Now, I just have one question, and we'll end it here on this whole Super Bowl craze segment. In the past few weeks, we've been talking about it. You know my answer to this. I want to ask you guys this, and I want to ask the listeners, so feel free to email in. Do you think Tom Brady's the best quarterback ever, and do you think Bill Belichick's the best coach ever? Jason, we'll start with you.
I'm sorry, I only remember the Stranger Things 2 commercial from the Super Bowl. Couldn't tell you a single thing about the game.
Jason,
but that
I have to
commercial,
ask.
I've watched it 10 times.
Jason, I have to ask, how was the Puppy Bowl? Did you get to it?
Oh, Puppy Bowl was amazing. Yeah, it was totes adorbs. But seriously, the Stranger Things 2 commercial, did you guys see it?
So I originally thought, so like I said, I haven't seen Stranger Things before, so when it originally came on, I was like, oh, Eggos is doing a Super Bowl commercial, like a retro throwback commercial, and then it started to change. And I will tell you, everything that I've ever seen on Stranger Things, it looks like it's pretty good. It looks, especially as a child of the 80s, it looks like I would be into something like that.
Yes, you totally would be. It's an amazing show, and I cannot wait for July or Halloween or whenever it's coming back.
It's at Halloween, I think.
There's been some Reddit and some subreddit confusion over whether that's the premiere date or the name of the season. So we'll see if it comes back in July like season 1, or if we have to actually wait until Halloween night and then everybody takes November 1st off because they've been up all night watching Stranger Things. Or maybe that's just me.
I kind of hope it's slightly before Halloween, because that time of year, I just love that whole spooky movie type of mentality, and I just think it would be really cool if it started like early October, but I don't know if that's when it's going to start. Jason, you totally dodged my question, by the way. Are you going to continue to dodge it?
Well, it's not that he dodged the question. I don't think he ever had a chance to answer it because I just chimed in. So, anyways.
Yeah, sure. Brady's the best quarterback of all time.
Sure. That's a great.
If I say no, you're just going to argue with me. So
I'm not going to argue because everyone's entitled to their opinion. I have my opinion. I just wanted to know your guys' opinion.
Yeah, he's a pretty good quarterback.
Pretty good quarterback.
He's all right. He's doing a good job.
I mean, I don't know where he was the first 3 quarters of the game, but I mean, it's fine.
So here's what I have to say, and this is how I view it. I have always thought of, even as a diehard Broncos fan, I've always thought of, as much as it pains me to say it, Joe Montana being the best quarterback of all time. And I always put Elway 2 or 3 back from him. And even though Brady has won more Super Bowls, been to almost twice as many as Montana went to, I just can't put him above Montana. And I think that goes back to the mentality of, if you were to ask a 15, 16-year-old today who's the best basketball player that ever lived, most of them are going to say LeBron James, correct? If you were to ask a 35-year-old, 40-year-old who's the best basketball player of all time, they're going to say Michael Jordan. You ask a 70-year-old, they're probably going to say Russell. So to me, it's always like a generational thing. Growing up watching Montana, I just view Montana as the best quarterback of all time, and it's going to be hard to change that. No matter how many wins, no matter how many championships LeBron gets, I'm always going to view Jordan as the best of all time. Now, Belichick, I will say, however, is the best coach of all time because what he's been able to do with not just Brady, but with that whole team. I mean, You go back and look at those first few teams that won the Super Bowl. They didn't have anybody. I mean, you're talking about Deion Branch, as their best wide receiver on their team. And so the fact that he's been able to do it with the people that they have on their team is truly amazing.
My stance is, and it's always been, they don't need anybody as long as they have Belichick as the coach. I mean, obviously, there's a huge asterisk to that next to Brady. But outside of those two, we don't need anybody.
He admits it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Brady obviously we need. But I have no idea what would happen if he left and someone like Garoppolo came in. I doubt we'd be able to mirror the same success.
You know who I feel really bad for in this whole thing? The Cleveland Browns. You want to know why? Because they actually fired Bill Belichick years and years and years ago, and then he went to the Patriots.
Oh, seriously?
Well, that was the Baltimore Ravens that fired him, actually.
The Browns fired him. That was the year they left to become the Baltimore Ravens. And before we move on, Mike, I just got to ask, what was that party like that you were at for the first 3.5 quarters? I mean, you guys had to have been just dead to the wall.
Well, the first quarter wasn't bad. We were optimistic because it was 0-0 still. We were obviously spoiled fans, so we're like, why haven't we scored yet? But actually, in the first quarter, I wanted to say 0-0 because my Super Bowl squares pick was 0-0, so I won $125. But everyone was kind of like not down, but also not super happy either. Second and third quarter, obviously people were just pissed off. The superstitious people were like, I'm leaving the room, I'm going away. The other people were just yelling at the TV. There was like one or two people there that were hopeful that, we're going to still pull it off. I would say the lowest point was the end of the third quarter. There were people leaving. I'm not lying. There were people that left. I refused to leave until the last second ticked off the fourth quarter.
Come on.
And people were upset. Going into the middle of the fourth quarter, there was that glimmer of hope. And then obviously from there, it just became like sitting on the edge of your seat going, holy crap, is this really happening? Quarter one, though, not much excitement. Quarters 2 and 3 were despair and people leaving. And then quarter 4 was kind of disbelief.
Jason, the biggest question I have for you about the Super Bowl.
I'm ready.
What did you think of Lady Gaga's performance?
Well,
Jason's giving me the finger, everyone.
That you did last week.
I couldn't figure out how.
I need rum and coke right now. Is that a rum and coke?
No, this is actually wine. So because I've become the wine connoisseur, I've told you guys lately and I have actually a pretty funny story about how I got this wine. But anyways,
people who can't see, just drinking it out of a plastic cup.
So if I drop it doesn't ruin the floor. Classy.
Yeah. So Lady Gaga. Did you guys see the drones behind her when she was standing on top of the stadium? That was the best part of the whole performance, was how they made those drones light up and form all those different shapes. That's pretty cool.
How did they do that?
I have no idea.
I thought she committed. I told Jacqueline when we were watching it, when she jumped off, I thought she committed suicide right there on TV.
Well, that was a pretty awesome moment, except that they reported later that wasn't actually live. She didn't actually jump from the roof onto the stadium. So I thought that she lost a little bit of credibility because that wasn't a real deal. I mean, it made me think about what was it, like 24 years ago, then when Michael Jackson performed at the LA Coliseum. And back then, as a kid, I could not figure out how he could have raced around to the 4 corners of the stadium, appearing on each of the 4 different corners, and then seconds later in the very center of the field. Do you guys remember that?
Yes, the greatest performance, Super Bowl performance of all time. Yes.
It absolutely was. No, but it was fine. Just because I told a stolen joke about her last week doesn't make me a Lady Gaga fan, but it was fine. It was fine.
I'm sure our listeners appreciated that joke, though. It was pretty good. It was pretty.
You guys certainly didn't.
So you guys want to hear a quick story about how I got this wine?
Sure.
So you guys have known that I've told you the past couple weeks, or when I talked to you guys, if you guys drank red wine, because I was thinking about, getting into the whole drinking a glass of red wine a night. Something fair to do with my pregnant wife. I'm sure she appreciates it. So my wife had asked me, so I had bought some different wine, and some of which you're just like, oh man, why did I spend $4 on that? Like thinking maybe it'll turn out good, like a $2 chuck, and just didn't turn out to be very good. So I had to run to Walmart. Okay. And I say that because it's not like I'm like, oh, I don't want to have to go to Walmart. But my wife had actually asked me, she said, hey, can you go pick up for me I need a bra. And I was fine with that because usually my wife asks me to go to Victoria's Secret or goes and buy stuff from Victoria's Secret. So the fact that she was telling me just to run to Walmart really quick to go get her a bra, I was totally fine with. So I go into Walmart and I go and grab the bra, and then I think to myself, let me check out wine really quick here. So I go over to the wine section, find, I think it's Mark West 2014 Pinot Noir. And, classy stuff. I'm sure the listeners out there know what I'm talking about. Grab that bottle. And then as I'm at the checkout stand, I feel like I'm Mike and I see Snickers and I'm like, ooh, a Snickers. I'm going to grab a Snickers. So I'm in the checkout line and I do it myself, right? I do the self-checkout line. Scan the wine, scan the bra, scan the Snickers bar, and I have my glasses on. Well, I don't want to I don't put them in a bag because I'm trying to save the environment, right? So I'm walking out of Walmart and I have my glasses on, I have a bottle of wine in one hand, a bra in the other one, and of course I don't have enough hands to hold the Snickers, so the Snickers is hanging from my teeth. I put it in my teeth. So I'm walking out of Walmart with a bottle of wine, a bra, and a Snickers hanging from my mouth. And do you know how embarrassing it is to get looks from Walmart people?
From Walmart people.
Walmart people were looking at me, and I just thought, like, wow, this is a new low. This is a new low. So here's to you, Mark West. Here's to you and your wine.
In California, you can't buy alcohol in self-checkout.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that in Arizona.
Yeah, and I think the lady didn't even come over and check my ID. No, she didn't even
So for all you listeners that are under 21, if you want to get some alcohol,
well, Jason,
go to Arizona. And
I'm surprised you know what Walmarts are, because aren't they not allowed in some parts of California?
Funny. The last time I was at a Walmart was at your Walmart in Tucson, and I got the shit scared out of me because I didn't know about open carry laws. And I walked into Walmart, and there are just handguns strapped to people's waists in the basket of people's little scooters.
Well, especially where I live too. I mean, I'm out in the not in the liberal city of Tucson, but rather kind of on the outskirts.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the cowboys are, and yeah, they're packing. That's for sure.
Anyways, now moving on, we are going into our news segment. So Brian, you said you had something you got from the news. Jason and I have been terrible about finding news segments, actually.
So I just
Brian's been pretty good.
So it's not necessarily news, but it's something that I really noticed this past week, and it was just an observation I made. So just because I've seen a lot of these commercials started coming out, especially even during the Super Bowl too. This year, when it comes to movies, I mean, you have movies like Logan coming out, which is Wolverine, X-Men type of stuff. You have Kong coming out, which is another King Kong movie. Beauty and the Beast. Power Rangers. Okay? The Fate and the Furious, which is what? The 8th Fast and the Furious that's coming out, I think. You got Guardians of the Galaxy. There's another Aliens. There's Pirates of the Caribbean. They're redoing The Mummy again. Transformers is coming out. So I guess my thing with you guys is, Mike, you talked about, what was it, Manchester by the Sea? I think a couple weeks ago we were talking about that and how good.
Well, that wasn't in the podcast. You cut it out.
Yeah, I cut that out. That was boring. But anyways, you talked about how good of a movie that was. And so I just look at all these movies that are coming out. I mean, they're doing Batman again. They're coming out with Spider-Man, another Spider-Man again. So I think to myself, I'm like, didn't we come out with Spider-Man, like reboot this whole thing 10 years ago, and now we're rebooting it again? You talked about Manchester by the Sea being such a good movie. Do you guys ever think we're going to get back to, I mean, are we going to get burnt out on all these remakes and superhero movies and Hollywood being unoriginal?
I hope so, because it's getting old really fast. And we talked about it last time too, where there's a lack of originality, not just, we were talking about the rides at Disney, the lack of originality, but the lack of originality in movies. And even the things they consider original now, like Guardians of the Galaxy, not to harp on the same things we've always talked about, but that's kind of considered original now because it's the first time they've done it, is still based on something. So there is nothing coming out that is completely original.
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, not that I'm not to sound holier than thou, but like it is easy to say like, oh, it's unoriginal and all they do is sequels. But as soon as they come out with whatever the next sequel or the remake of, your or my favorite movie is, we're going to be the first ones in line. The next Jurassic World movie that comes out, like I can't wait, and I will be as excited for that as I am for anything else in movies that year. And it's not original. So I agree that there's a lot of it, a lot of unoriginal sort of rebooted content. With honestly, with two kids, like I don't get to the movies very often anyway, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on experiences that I'd otherwise have. And once they're on HBO, I can check it out or not. But a lot of these, like, what do they call, like blockbuster or like popcorn movies, like they definitely serve the lowest common denominator, and you kind of have to seek out the more like culturally relevant movies like Manchester by the Sea, which Mike saw. And I don't know, I find it hard to want to get into something like that unless a friend or family member have really recommended a movie like Manchester by the Sea, for example. I don't know, it's you don't get like critical mass behind a lot of the more like independent or artistic films.
So I'll say with that, when it comes to, so you have all these blockbuster movies that are coming out, and because I think the box office people are realizing, well, if we want to make our money back, that's how we're going to get the most money. So then they stay away from these significant ones, or I mean, every single time an Oscar nomination or Oscar winner, I have no idea. I've never even seen the film or hardly even heard about it, and so I just wonder myself. Not that I really care about Hollywood and its vitality, because I would love to see that place burn. But anyways,
Jesus.
But anyways, these studios realize, okay, well, if we're going to make our money back, here's how we do it. And all they care about is the money. And if they release a Manchester by the Sea, or they release these other type of original movies that either this generation or people don't want to have to seek stuff out like that they're not going to make their money back, so they're just going to stay away from it. And I just feel like, this is the way Hollywood is going to keep going, and it doesn't seem... I just think they're going to burn themselves out, and it's going to hurt Hollywood in the end.
Now, where there is a lot of originality, and we were talking about earlier, is on Netflix, like Stranger Things. And you could say there's obviously a lack of originality because it takes a lot from other movies, but it wasn't based off of a set thing that people are going to instantly recognize and go flock to. It's like Transformers, or
gosh, another one.
Well,
and I just think too with Netflix is that people, you don't have to pay for Netflix. You pay it per month, but you don't have to go to the movies. And whereas the movies, to go see a new movie that you don't know if you're going to like or not, you'd have to go spend $20 on it. Whereas with Netflix, you can just stay at home and see if you like it or not on the comfort of your own couch.
I just think it's a lower risk to like release something on Netflix.
Jason's trying to get in here.
Really trying to get in here. I'll shut up. Jason, go ahead.
Jason, why don't you go ahead and hang up? We obviously don't need you for this episode.
If there's one thing that I hate more than whatever rebooted, unoriginal blockbuster content, it is movies that are made with the intent of trying to win awards. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that crap Road to Perdition, the Tom Hanks movie about mobsters being sulky and sad, but that I turned to my buddy when we went and saw that in high school or college, and I said, what is this? Like, this is just, these are people just like trying to get the Academy to take note, and the rest of us are just along for the ride. That was the worst movie. Have you guys ever sat through The English Patient? I dare you to try to sit through The English Patient. I dare you.
Well, I'll say this. Because of where I used to working for Disney, I mean, you see how they roll these movies out each year. And the reason that they put them at certain parts of the year is so the Academy takes notice of it for next year. I will say it's very strategic how they plan these movies, buy these movies, and when they're going to release them.
If they want to make movies that they think are going to win Academy Awards to people like you, me, and Jason are totally boring, I'm fine with that. I really don't care. Go for it. Certain people like them. What bugs me, though, is when it comes to movies that should be entertaining and should be those like not even guilty pleasures, but action-packed, they're all remakes and reboots or prequels or sequels. I would just love to have like a Die Hard come out, again, or not a remake of Die Hard, obviously, but you know what I mean. Like a new movie that's completely original that has that same weight as Die Hard did.
I thought you were wanting another Die Hard to come out. I was like, isn't that against the whole thing we're talking about here?
Have you been listening?
I just like, I just want that again. It's like, do we have that? Maybe we do, and I'm not even thinking about it. Someone's gonna like email, like, what about this movie that you didn't think of, like the Bourne Identity that came out 8 years ago, but. Nothing has come out that's been completely original, that's been a popcorn movie. All right, so before we get into our main segment, I wanted to talk about something that I feel as adults we all experience, and that's DIY projects around the house. So last week, I talked about how I like to walk around the house and admire things, and I know that really made you guys crack up a bit.
I think that resonated with a lot of people, actually.
Yeah, and I get that from my dad. Actually, he told me long before
he gets walking around his house from his father.
Long before,
Dad, what are you doing? Shut up, son. I'm admiring things.
Long before I even did that, my dad told me that when he was a first-time homeowner, he would walk around his house when everyone was asleep, when he was a young guy, and say to himself, I own this. I own this.
Well, but your dad was also an immigrant from Portugal, right? Who probably didn't come from a lot of...
It's not like he just got off the boat and, like, bought a house. He moved
at Ellis Island after signing in.
He immigrated here when he was 2, so not really an immigrant. He was an immigrant, but technically he was not, like, speaking Portuguese as his primary language. No, but he was very proud of what he had. But I wanted to talk about the DIY element of it, because when you do this, you see what you have in your house, or even if you don't own a house, you rent something that you've worked on, you're even more proud of. But when you see it and you're proud of it, it's not an easy task. So as 3, married men who have homes, I wanted to ask you guys, what has been your worst DIY project and why? And it's funny because even earlier this week, Jason, texted Brian and I his new lawnmower, and the viewer should know Jason got the most powerful lawnmower on the market. This thing will just eat the grass like no other. I think like every lawn company might have one. Jason, what'd you get again?
It's a battery-powered lawnmower. It requires 2 batteries that have to charge overnight. It has 2 little mini blades, and it makes about as much noise as a box fan, and is just about as powerful as one. It's very environmentally friendly for up here in good old Northern California.
Is it very environmentally friendly because it actually doesn't cut the grass? It actually leaves the grass as it is?
I think I told you guys that I was going out to massage my grass yesterday. That's pretty much all it did.
It took the grass's feelings into consideration. Yeah. So, on to the worst DIY project. Who wants to answer that first?
Here's what I'll say. I haven't had a bad DIY project in a while, and the reason for that is because of YouTube. YouTube has saved me when it has come to DIY projects around the house. I fixed our refrigerator was making this noise that it would just start whistling throughout the house, and my wife said, exactly, right? I enjoyed it. It sounded nice. It was like the 7 dwarfs were in the house walking around. But she said either we fix this or we get a new fridge. Well, I was not about to go get a new fridge just because something was whistling on the fridge, and so I actually found out what was the problem, and it turned out to be a $20 part that I ordered from Amazon, of course, and went behind the fridge, fixed it in a matter of 15 minutes, and it works perfectly fine, and we've had this now for another 3 years. So I've had pretty good success with DIY projects. We're about ready to start ripping up bathrooms here in a little bit, and I've told my wife that I think I can do it. So maybe in a couple weeks I may have some bad DIY project stories, because that's going to be interesting when I start ripping the bathrooms apart.
Yeah, well, unlike Brian, who can't think of a single bad DIY project, I've never had one go well. Never, ever. I am the least handy person. I have tried to program garage door remotes. I've tried to rewire doorbells. I've tried to build little playhouses for my kids. I break everything I touch within minutes, and I get mad, and I throw stuff around, and then Sarah has to come in and clean up.
Wait, really? Jason,
believe it or not, believe it or not, I have a temper.
Okay.
But the worst DIY project that I can remember was pretty recently, and Sarah sent me up to Oakland to go buy a play structure for the kids. We played with them when we were kids. They were like these little sphere, like dome climbing jungle gym things that are made of like a series of triangles that make this half circle. So I drove out to Oakland to buy this thing from a stranger. I went into their backyard with a bunch of tools that I had never used and had to take it apart from her backyard.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm at her house with her weird dog for probably 2.5 hours, like taking this thing apart.
Did you renegotiate the price? Were you like, well, now that I have to do this, I'm only paying you X amount?
We were only getting it for $20, and these things probably retail for maybe $250. So I was fine on price. Get it in my car, drive it home. I try building it the first time between rainstorms.
The first time.
And I was convinced that it did not matter whether the green pieces and the beige pieces went in any particular order, because to me they all looked about the same length. But turns out that it absolutely did matter which pieces went where. So I got about halfway done building it, had to deconstruct the entire thing, and went to rebuild it a second time. But in the meantime, we discovered not only did I build it wrong, but the entire thing was infested with spiders. The entire thing. And it was the kind of spiders that have the large gray, real bubbly body with like pretty thin, long legs. And every piece they came crawling out of, big ones, little ones. At one point, I looked to my right, and there was a spider crawling up my jacket. And there's nothing more terrifying in the world than a spider. So I took that jacket off, my under jacket off, and I ran out to the front yard as fast as I could. And Sarah had to come again, clean up after me.
Kill the spider.
There were so many of them, and that I was worried that now we were going to have spiders, because we don't have any bugs at this house. And this morning, I walked into the master bedroom, and one of those exact same kind of spiders was walking across the wall in the master bedroom.
And they're forming an army in your backyard.
And you called Sarah in to get it, correct?
I killed it, but I didn't want to. Normally, Sarah comes in and kills all the spiders.
Well, now you have that lawnmower to kill them all.
Yeah.
I'm sure that lawnmower just picks them up, and just redistributes them. Yeah. What about you, Mike? You did a lot of construction in your house, what, a year ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, most of it's been painting. Actually, I was talking to Lauren about this, because earlier this week, she's like, what are you guys going to talk about? And I was like, well, we're going to talk about roommates, but we're also going to talk about a DIY project. She's like, oh, you want to talk about the one where you put in the light fixture dimmer, and when you turn the power back on, poof of smoke came out of the light. And I was like, no, I don't think about that one. That wasn't the worst one. That was the most terrifying one. And I don't mind working with electricity because installing light fixtures isn't a huge deal. But after doing that with the dimmer, I got a little more apprehensive. So we had a electrician come out to do some work after that. But she does all the plumbing stuff. I do all the electrical stuff. She's really good with plumbing, and I'm good with electrical. Well, used to be good with electrical. But the worst DIY project, and I was kind of, it was between two, and they both had to go along the lines of climbing up a ladder. But one I decided not to do was installing a ceiling fan. And we have a cathedral ceiling in our family room, and it's 14 feet high. That was absolutely terrifying. And our 14-pound Chihuahua was circling around the ladder like a shark, and I was so scared he was going to knock it and I was going to fall, because I was not.
Yeah, your 14-pound Chihuahua was going to knock your ladder over.
Yeah, I know, right? But I was yelling at him. I was like, get away from the ladder! But the worst project...
As he's hanging from the light fixtures.
Yeah. 14 feet doesn't seem that high, but when you're standing up there looking down...
yeah, it does.
It's pretty high. But the worst was... And it was also the most effective, but it was the worst, was we had to take down every one of our shutters and paint them. We have 22 shutters in our house, and it's because our house just has a ton of windows. And I had to go up the ladder, and there's 6 screws in each shutter. And as I'm taking out the screws, hornets start flying out of the shutter. Now, spiders are terrifying, and I don't like spiders. When you're 20 feet in the air on a ladder and hornets are flying out of behind of a shutter, that is the absolute worst. So I'm like screaming as I'm drilling the shutter, or the screw out of the shutter, and the hornets are flying around. And I'm over our stairway, which is brick. So if I fall, I'm probably either going to break a bone or kill myself. So it was absolutely terrifying. So then we were like, after we get all the shutters off, we're like, okay, thank God we got all the shutters off. But then we had to paint them. So we put a blanket over the grass and we paint them. But we did it in July or August. So after we're done, we're like, oh, good, they're all painted. Then we take the blanket off, all the grass is dead. I care so much about my lawn, and all I do is bitch about my neighbors that don't care about their lawn. What?
You admire your lawn.
Yeah, I walk outside as I'm drinking my coffee after I'm mattering my house, and I admire my lawn, except for right now because it's a blanket of 2 feet of snow for my lawn.
Tom, the neighbor's doing it again. He's outside looking at things.
I do that a lot. They probably think I'm insane. But I bitch and complain about my neighbors that don't take care of their lawn. They got weeds growing everywhere, and I'm just like, buy a lawnmower, even if it's like an eco-friendly lawnmower like Jason's, and mow your damn lawn. It's not that hard to do. And water your lawn, unless you live in California where you have water bans and you can't water your lawn. But I had giant squares of dead grass all over my yard, and I was pissed. And here I am, like, complaining about my neighbors, and I'm like, crap, now my lawn's just as bad. Then I had to go back up and put the shutters back up, and my neighbor comes along, and he's like, I'm going to help you guys. And I was like, oh, that's very nice of him. And he's holding a ladder, and then it's one of those ladders where it extends to like 20 feet, and he accidentally like releases a latch, and it falls square on my foot. And I thought I broke my foot, but my neighbor was helpful and being nice. So I'm like dancing around and like all in pain. He's like, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. And I am like in severe pain. But at the end of the day, once it was all done, it made a huge difference, and we were very proud of it. And I went out there before it snowed, and I was admiring it.
Yes, taking a look at it.
It was good for you, Mike.
And if you guys want to email in and tell us about your DIY projects or any things that you guys have done, we'd love to hear about it.
Oh, I'd love to hear that from the listeners. That'd be awesome.
The one thing I love to do is work on the house, and it's super cheap and it's super effective, like painting, right? It's a pain in the butt, but it's super cheap, and it makes a huge difference. Jason's shaking his head no, because
I hate painting so much. I hate it. I hate every bit of painting.
Why? You're tall enough. You could probably just reach the ceiling and be fine with it.
I hate like trying to pry those stupid paint can lids off. And then how do you get the paint from the paint can to whatever device you're going to use to get it inside? Oh,
device? What do you mean device?
Yeah, what device are you using?
Because usually, like, we're just touching up like little windowsills or holes or whatever, and so you've got this 15 gallons of, I don't know how much paint comes in a thing.
Why are you buying 15 gallons of paint?
You got 15 gallons of white paint, and then you've got this whole garage full of stuff that you don't want to get white paint on. How are you supposed to get the paint out of the tub and into like a little like Dixie cup to paint from? Without pouring 15 gallons of paint everywhere.
First, I think you're being had at the Lowe's or Home Depot if they're telling you to buy 15 gallons of paint. Sir, do I need that little pint over there or that 15-gallon one? Sir, you definitely need the 15-gallon one. That'll be $375.
And then, like, how freaking long do I have to shake this thing of paint until it doesn't have that marbly, oily look at the top of it? Like, who has ever said, I've really enjoyed this painting project?
Do you just get the wooden sticks to stir it?
Yeah.
Oh, I always forget to get the stick, and then you're looking for like something that you can throw away that's long enough to go into a thing of paint. I agree with Mike that electrical projects, if they're like beginner, are really fun and gratifying, and it's fun to see like when they go well, which they never do. Like that's fun. But plumbing and yard work and paint, I hate it. I hate all of it. I will pay any amount of money anytime to have someone else take care of it.
I think the problem isn't the paint, Jason. I think it's the person painting. That's the problem.
I think you sound a lot like Sarah.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
So, moving on to our feature segment is roommates. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
The ugly.
And just so the listener knows, and you probably could have even assumed this, Brian, Jason, and I, we've all lived with each other. We all lived together in one house, and we've actually even lived with each other. I lived with Jason, Brian lived with Jason, and Brian and I even lived together for a short stint over the summer. when we were at my parents' house, and that was interesting as well. So we wanted to share what it's like having roommates, but also the transition into living with a spouse and what's different and what's interesting and the pros and cons of each. I'll just start off by asking you guys, what's the biggest difference? What have you noticed, living with a spouse versus living with a roommate, and when you were in your early 20s versus now?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that as we've gotten older and I'm living with a spouse, like, you both have a vested interest in keeping everything clean and keeping the fridge stocked for everybody. And there's definitely like a shared responsibility for everything. And you guys were the best roommates you could ask for. But at the end of the day, like, you still were only responsible for keeping your stuff clean and your side of the pantry stacked. And I was only responsible for my stuff. So, that's definitely like the biggest difference, I'd say.
Well, and I just think as young 20-year-olds, you don't have that responsibility to take care of things as much as you would now. I mean, I thought the same thing, what you were talking about as a 34-year-old, 35-year-old. I'm not just going to sit there and leave food all over my kitchen and food out and leave clothes everywhere. I mean, not that I necessarily did that when I was in my young 20s, but there were parts when you had roommates to where stuff was just everywhere and you didn't necessarily have the biggest care in the world about it, whereas now if that happened, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine if I did something like that. I did something like that now.
Like when we were freshmen and sophomores in college, like there was definitely like this extra noticeable mentality that I'm just responsible for this much and everything else, that's not my problem. Like, you figure it out. Whereas by the time that like Mike and I were living together, like, we were just better roommates to each other. And even though I didn't have to, like, I don't know, like we started to take care of each other and like make sure that the place that we lived in was...
The back massages were amazing, by the way.
Just that it was, there was less selfishness. And I think that good roommates are not selfish and think about the
others
people they live with.
And give back rubs to
regularly.
others.
I'll say this, and I'm saying this in the lens of only being married for 5 months, but we've been living together for several years. When you have a roommate that's not your spouse, it's either the ultimate high is in like, we're going to have an awesome party tonight, or we're going to do something, we're going to go to the movies and it's going to be epic. That sounds so douchey saying that, but you know what I mean. But then there's like the ultimate lows, like the sight of them just bugs the ever-living shit out of you. So, for example, when you have just a long, exhausting day at work, right? You're just tired, and you go to your favorite fast food or food restaurant, and you pick up your food, and you're just frustrated, and you get home, and you want to just watch TV, and your roommate's sitting there watching Food Network or something stupid that you don't want to see. Jason shaking his head. Is there anything more gratifying, though, when you do have a roommate and you're just annoyed when you walk into your apartment and nobody's there, right?
Well, and I will say this, like, I think the whole thing with a roommate, too, is it's not, a lot of the times we didn't just have one roommate. Like, there were 3 of us. So when you walked into that room, there were more than likely you were going to walk into 1, 2, or maybe even all 3 people being there, So,
and depending on who that roommate is, more people, because they're like, hey, I have friends over, and you have no idea who these weirdos are and why your place why your place smells differently.
That was the worst, when there's people over that you don't know and they're sitting on your couch or going to your fridge, and you get home and it's just been a long day and that's the only TV in the place. Because you can't afford to have it in multiple rooms in the house, and we didn't have iPhones back then. Yeah, that was the worst.
That's where you almost want to be like, mine, and then you tell them to get the hell out of there.
Well, and I think my biggest frustration with roommates just has to go back to the whole, what we were talking about, taking care of things, right? Like, I couldn't tell you how many times I walked into the bathroom in college and one of our roommates, who I love dearly, but at the same time he had his faults, to where he would have top ramen or mac and cheese the night before, and the way that he would clean that bowl would be to, hey, I'm done with this bowl, I'm going to fill it up with water and then leave it on the counter for a day,
I didn't mind that as much as the pubic hair everywhere, all over the counter in the toilet. That's what really got to me.
All over the counter.
I think the same roommate that you're talking about also, when he would finish in the bathroom, used my cologne as air freshener, making stinky smells in the bathroom. He would use my cologne, my Tommy Hilfiger. That's the most expensive cologne you can buy at CVS.
So, Jason, when you smell that Tommy Hilfiger now, what do you think of?
Oh,
it ruins it for you. It ruins it.
Well, even going back before that, college is like one of your first experience with roommates. And Brian, you and I were suite mates, and I mean
yes,
that in
we
the
were.
Sense of
no, you mean that just like you said it.
Yes, SWEET, suite mates.
When we were signing up for housing senior year, I was at work, and I think Mike called me and said, "I want to move into one of the houses, and there's going to be 8 of us in this house." And stone cold, I remember saying, "I will only live with you if I get one of the 2 one-person bedrooms."
Yes, period. That was your main thing right away. Yes.
And I chose what I thought was the best room. Turns out it was the worst room because I was right next to the front door, right next to the bathroom, and so my
and the family room or the living room.
Yeah.
Right. So my solution, which is the best solution, was passive-aggressive notes all over the house. Anything that bothered me, just write a passive-aggressive note.
So going along with that, our senior year, we lived with 8 different people. 8 people was way too many, in my opinion.
Especially when you take in consideration who those 8 people were. And I think they run the gamut of the type of roommate anyone out there of the listeners have had. You had the gamers who were stuck in a room that smelled like dry sweat that were drinking Mountain Dew Code Red. There were 2 of them. There was the
that never came out. Like they never came out of that room.
There was the raging alcoholic who was my roommate, who's probably listening to this podcast. Hey, how you doing? And he's probably laughing, and
he's probably like, "Hey, that's me. That's me."
And this guy had no regard. He was pretty much the Whitey Bulger of drinking on our campus. And I distinctly remember he fell asleep on our couch holding a 12-pack of Coors Light like it was a teddy bear.
Yes.
And the RAs were coming over, and I said, "Hey, we got to clean this house up. The RAs are coming." And he goes, "You can tell the RAs to F off," as they were walking right up behind me, and I was trying to get this 12-pack of Coors Light out of his dead grip. Then we had the super slob roommate who, clogged the toilet, and when Jason went to the bathroom, didn't clean the bathroom floor mat that he got dirty toilet water on. So when Jason went to the bathroom,
barefoot,
what happened, Jason?
Barefoot.
Yeah.
I thought, wow, I wonder why these bath mats are wet. Someone must have just taken a shower. Maybe I'll ask the guys about this when I come out. Hey guys, why is the bath mat wet?
Little you know, there was like poop particles in the water that your bare feet were touching.
Oh, I've never forgotten, Mike.
I will say this. The first time living with girls was not a fun experience for me either. You know, I mean, talk about a total change. Jason and I actually had lived with 2 girls after college, and that wasn't the greatest experience either. So it's not like we went from living with guys and it was like, oh my gosh, total, like, just messy, to living with girls. And I mean, that was an eye-opening experience, don't you think, Jason?
Absolutely. It was eye-opening to see that there were things that you and I were used to doing, and as roommates, that they just thought was unacceptable or rude or not considerate. And I don't think we were being particularly, any of those things. But it was probably Brian and mine's first experience in living with somebody whose standards of living were just way higher than ours.
Mike, what would you say was your biggest difference then when you started living with a girl?
Well, I mean, big difference is you guys weren't dating those girls and I was. The first girl I ever lived with who is now my wife. So the biggest difference with living with Lauren as opposed to living with you guys or living with another random roommate was the amount of TV I had to watch that I didn't want to watch. I say that lovingly, but I'll be totally honest. Lauren probably watches way more sports and ESPN and NFL that she would ever want to watch. And we do find happy mediums a lot. Second to that was how much I have to consider, what I do, where I eat. I know I've talked a lot about what I eat, as it's unhealthy, but where I eat, and I'm sure you guys, used to sit in front of the TV with a TV tray and watch TV as you eat. that drastically changes when you live with a girl, and I'm sure it's going to change even more when we welcome a child and we have a family and we sit down at a table. I mean, that's a huge difference. When you live with a spouse, you're sitting down, you're talking about your day. And sometimes I feel like before I go to this podcast, I'm like, I have to figure out what I'm going to say. And it's similar to when I come home, it's like, all right, let's see, what am I going to talk about? How am I going to keep this lively? And the other thing is too, it's like,
how am I going to keep this marriage going?
No, but I mean, like, we have natural conversations, but it's also entertainment too. Like, she'll be like, "Hey, you want to play a game?" And I'm like, "A game? Like, I don't know."
I want to play a game.
I never came home to like Jason or Brian, and they're sitting there, and Jason's like, "Hey, want to play a board game? You want to play Guess Who?" No, it's usually like,
well,
hey,
Jason probably would say something like that. So, Jason, I'm actually kind of curious how Mike and I both, before we got married at least, lived by ourselves for a while. Was there ever a point to where you ever lived by yourself before you actually lived with your wife?
No. I've never had a place of my own where I lived by myself.
So what was I'm curious because you got married at what, 23? Were you 23 at the time you got married? 24?
24, I think.
So what was that experience like, especially as a young 20-year-old going from living with guys most of the time to all of a sudden now switching over and living with a woman?
Well, I mean, I loved college. I loved like what living in the dorms was like, what living in apartments was like, and we had, as you said, that short stint living with those girls for one summer, and so like it was all I was really used to. So I really didn't think like, oh, this is going to be a huge change, even though I was going to be living with somebody that I'd never lived with before. It was still pretty a familiar setup in that you're living in an apartment with somebody your age, with your interests, who I just happened to be sleeping with.
I got a question for you guys. When you were younger, what did you envision it would be like living with someone versus to the reality? Like when I'll just say, like, when you're younger, you think like, oh, it's just going to be like life now, except someone will be there and we'll like totally get along. You know what I mean? Are you following what I'm trying to ask?
I wouldn't. Well, I'll just say this. I think that anytime you go into living with somebody, your expectations or your feelings toward it change as the months go by. I remember living with a good friend from high school one time when I had moved to North Hollywood, and it was like, oh, this is going to be fun, living with the best friend I had in high school, and literally by 2 months in, I took every opportunity I could to get away from the guy because he was just like around me 24/7, and I have no bones saying that about him because I think the guy's a total jerk now. And I hope he listens to this podcast because I'd love to go off on him even more. You're an asshole and you know it. And halfway into living with him, I would come visit you guys like randomly some nights. You know what I mean? Just to get away from him because I couldn't stand being there. So I just think your expectations sometimes of how you go into things change.
So before we move on from this segment, I just have one question for you guys. What do you think your worst quality being a roommate is?
Passive aggressiveness. quick to anger, passive aggressive.
Quick to anger.
Wait, jealousy, that's another one. That's a different one than passive aggressive. What do you get jealous about?
Well, I mean, oh my gosh, when Brian was just talking about living in North Hollywood, I was so jealous the whole time that he was down there, and when he would start to tell these stories about how he was getting mad at his former BFF, I was like, yeah, get mad.
Like Mean Girls style.
Right now or back then?
Back then.
Back then, I think just taking some things too seriously. I think there was a better way probably to go about telling our roommate to clean his bowl out instead of sitting there and getting into, like, not yelling matches, but like, dude, clean your bowl out. This is disgusting. But, you can...
Just to clarify, when you say bowl, you mean soup bowl.
Not his bowels, his bowl.
No, bowl. Never mind.
Oh, his bowl.
My bowl.
Yeah, no, not his.
Jason's
not
totally
his.
confused.
Jason, not his.
What are you talking about?
His weed bowl.
I don't even know what a weed bowl is. Let's keep
I don't think it's called a weed bowl.
Not a wee bowl, like a rodent. Never mind.
A weed bowl.
Google bowl when you're done with this podcast, Jason. You'll see.
What would you say was yours, Mike? But then also, what would you say yours is now?
Well, peeing on the toilet seat would probably what Jason would say about my worst quality.
One time, and you said you didn't do it, so let's just put it to bed 10 years later.
Who doesn't lift the toilet seat up when they go pee?
No, I don't think it was.
Mike
I think
does.
It was when
Mike does.
I think it was when I
do.
was sitting down and it got between the seat and the base, and it like somehow leaked out. I don't know what the story is, but Jason said it was on the base. I don't know.
I was pretty mad.
You said Mike's pee.
Let's see. My worst quality as a roommate was probably. I would try to like commandeer the situation. Like I would try to find a way to get into the kitchen first, or like get to the TV first, so I could do what I wanted. And I would be like sneaky about it, you know. Like I would try to figure out when they would get home, and I'd try to beat them, or I'd try to figure out when they got up. So I would try to like be manipulative in that way, and like, oh, I'm gonna get to the TV first, so I can watch what I want. So greediness, I guess, would be mine. As a spouse, I'd say not greediness, but I try to, and when we have arguments about stuff about the house, I can't be wrong, and that's a fault of mine, and I should try to get better about that.
Jason, what would you say yours is now? Like, what would you say that maybe what Sarah gets most frustrated with you about?
Probably that I, like...
Passive-aggressive write notes around the house?
Slam scissors in the door?
Oh, don't we have lots of examples of Jason being a great roommate? No, I'd probably just that I'm tired after work, and I should give her and my family as much attention as I give everything else during the day. But by the time I get home, I am flat, and sometimes it's hard to not be flat and be as engaged as I should be. And so that's probably and that materializes in lots of different ways, but mostly like me being fairly like indifferent or seemingly indifferent when like we're trying to have a conversation about something.
I'd probably have to say I think what Mike mentioned, just the putting them before myself, whether it's when I come home from work or pick my daughter up, or because I usually my wife will get home a little bit later, so I'm usually one who cooks, so I'll cook, and she's had a long day, and so sometimes she gets home and it's just drained. And I think to myself, I'm like, dude, I just did all this stuff. I had to go pick the daughter up. I was at work all day too, and I had to come home and cook. Can you be a little bit more appreciative? But I think sometimes that she's just got a very hard job and a very busy job, that sometimes I just need to be a little less selfish with things and a little bit more caring toward her needs. And I don't want this to sound like, geez, Brian, you definitely should because she's pregnant right now. I mean in general, whether she's pregnant or not.
You've got mail.
For our wrap-up segment, we do want to answer some emails that we got. And Brian, you are kind of the master of the email account and the Twitter account.
We got 2 again this week, and so I'm gonna read these. But I'm not going to get to everything because some of these topics I think that we should really consider and actually do for some future podcasts. But one of the first emails we got is from Steve, and he is talking about Netflix. And because we had talked about it in the previous episodes, so he was asking us, he says, hey, I've recently watched Lost and Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead, and he's talking about binge watching them on Netflix that a lot of people do. So he says, what are some good shows, some good movies that people out there should binge watch, or that we are currently binge watching right now?
Making a Murder. And I don't know if you guys have seen that, but
no, I haven't yet.
It starts off kind of not slow, but you think it's going in a certain direction, and then maybe you think, oh, it's just about each episode is a different case, and then it just goes off into this direction where you are so enthralled with this case, and you learn things that happen that are just like, how could this happen? And you can't wait to watch the next episode because you want to see what happens. Second recommendation is The Killing seasons 1 and 2.
I would definitely say if you haven't seen Stranger Things, it's so great. And I was trying to watch The Crown about the British monarchy, and I wanted to like it, but I feel like it's another one of those stupid road to perdition things where it's just a bunch of Emmy bait.
I would say right now, Jacqueline is watching This Is Us. She's been watching on demand. I think it's an NBC show, and so she's been catching up on that. I've told Jason about this show, and he doesn't like it, but we absolutely do, which is House of Cards on Netflix. That I absolutely love. I got into that.
I couldn't watch past the first episode. Like, he kills a dog, and I was like, nope, not for me. Can't watch anything. Not that I'm some PETA advocate, but if you show a dog dying, you pretty much lost me.
And the second email we got was from Frank, and one of the questions he had was, I just want to get your take on this really quick. He says, is it acceptable for a guy to be wearing skinny jeans, or am I just too old to understand this? So, Mike, what's your take on skinny jeans?
Well, my take in skinny jeans is it's acceptable because I've gained weight, so my regular jeans have become skinny jeans. But normally, if I were to just go buy jeans, I would not say it's acceptable. If you want to wear skinny jeans, I'm not here to say don't.
Well, I am here to say don't wear skinny jeans. The story I have is, and I'm going to tell this, and it'll probably embarrass my nephew, but I'm not going to use his name, so hopefully he's okay. And he's 18, 19 years old right now, so he's past this phase, and so hopefully he doesn't get too upset with me telling this story. But about 7 years ago, I was out in California for Christmas, and we have a big old Christmas function where the whole family gets together. And my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, came and with their 3 kids. And right when I saw my sister, I hadn't seen her in a while, so I give her a hug, and right away she goes, hey, check out his pants. And she's pointing at my nephew, who is about 12 years old, his pants. And I look, and he's wearing skinny jeans. Right? And I'm like, oh gosh. And she goes, no, ask him where he got them. So I said, hey bud, where did you get those jeans? And I don't know whether it was at Target or Kohl's or JCPenney, whatever he said. And so he says where he got him, and then his mom says, no, what section did you get him in? And he's like, shut up, Mom, shut up. And he leaves, and she tells me that because he's 11, 12 years old, he wasn't big enough to get the skinny jeans in the boys section, that he actually had to go to the girls section and get girl jeans for them to be skinny enough to put on. And so we razzed him the rest of the night, and I hope he's a good sport about me telling that story.
So, Jason, do you have a life tip of the week?
I do. So I've been doing this. I don't know how I thought of it, but I've been doing it for years. Everybody hates setting their alarm clock in the morning, and if you guys are like me, you use your phone. Many years ago, I started giving my alarm like a little name, so like a little bit of text would show up on the screen when the alarm goes off. So when I grab my phone to turn off the alarm, usually I'll put either something like a funny quote, maybe one of you guys said, or something interesting that I heard, or like a positive note to myself that's like, go attack the day. That's not it. That's not actually it. But something positive, so that as I'm dreading that my alarm is going off and it's time to start the day, I look at my phone and automatically I try and get myself into a more positive mental space that I use to get out of bed and start the day. So if you that's my little life tip. It's not going to change everything, but it's a nice way to put a new spin on an alarm clock.
And a better way to start the day.
So that'll wrap up this week's episode. Thanks for listening again. We hope to hear you next week, and you guys have a great week, and feel free to email us with any questions or comments, and hit that download button and continue to listen. Thanks, everybody.
Go attack the day, everyone.
Oh, really?